Welcome everyone to the Jewish Study Center class on Kabbalah, experiencing Kabbalah. We had an introduction class about a month ago or 6 weeks ago about introduction to Kabbalah. And as Jay mentioned to a number of you a few minutes ago, this class will be, we'll go over that thing in a lot more detail and also have a lot more topics than that. My name is Jerry Garfinkel. I am the treasurer of the Study Center. As treasurer, I need to tell you that our classes are all free. Our instructors, such as Jay Makrensky, are very knowledgeable and very good instructors. But we have expenses. We have to pay for the Zoom that we are on right now. We have to pay for our website, etc. So donations are welcome. If you go to our website and click on donate, you can then donate by PayPal or credit card or send a check. If you indicate you want to send a check, the website will give you the address where to send it. Okay, now I'm also like technical director. So let me give you a few technical points. I just turned on the transcript so you can see what is being said. It's fairly accurate. It's not exactly accurate. Sometimes words get misinterpreted by the system. This session is being recorded. When the recording is ready, I'll post it and I'll send an email to whoever's registered so you can then see the recording. What else? I want to say something else. What do I want to say? Okay, that's about it. I'm going to. Everyone is encouraged to write comments and or questions in the chat box, and I believe Jay will be looking at it. So every once in a while he might respond to it. Otherwise, we'll respond at the end of the class. So let me now introduce the instructor that many of you have met him before, Jay Makrensky. Jay is a past member of the Study Center board of directors. He's a leading Kabbalah scholar. He's written 2 books on Kabbalah, Understanding Evil and Ethics Through Kabbalah, and Connecting to Judaism, Spirituality Through Kabbalah. You can buy it on Amazon or through him. But more interesting stuff that I just learned a few minutes ago is Jay's interest in Kabbalah came from the Study Center when he was actually a student at the Study Center at the very beginning of the Study Center's existence in 1978. He took a couple classes in Kabbalah, and that really inspired him. And he learned more about Kabbalah, and then he actually got a number of graduate degrees, including a PhD, relating to Kabbalah and religious studies. So this is kind of like a full circle. He's now coming and teaching that. And he began as a student of Kabbalah at the Study Center. So I will now turn it over to Jay, if I can find his picture here. Okay, Jay, take over, please.
Yeah, so that's right, 1978, the first year of the Study Center, I bravely took a course in Kabbalah, which is not exactly the same Kabbalah as we scholars teach today, but it was so interesting to me. I started reading everything I could and applying it to my Jewish practice. So I see myself as both a scholar of Kabbalah, professor of Kabbalah, and a Kabbalist. And not all professors of Kabbalah or even rabbinic teachers of Kabbalah actually would call themselves Kabbalists. And I think you'll see as I go through the lecture tonight and the next couple of weeks what that means to be a Kabbalist, and how, for those who are seeking spirituality, Kabbalah really can fill that gap. So the first question is, what is Kabbalah? And where does it come from? Well, Kabbalah was mainstream Judaism for 400 years or more. Some scholars believe it really goes back to biblical times. And certain books have so much Kabbalistic orientation to them, including the book of Esther, that it was the basic concepts of Kabbalah go back to Psalms and Proverbs, the wisdom literature generally, and even back to Torah, to Orthodox Kabbalists. The Kabbalah originated in biblical times with Abraham. I don't think it went back quite that far, but Kabbalah was mainstream Judaism for hundreds of years. So what is it? And why was it lost? The Kabbalah means to receive, the Kabel, and Mikubalim, receivers, or those who were accepted into a secret society, are the two translations of the word of a Kabbalist. I don't see myself as one that was accepted into a secret society to learn the secret meaning of Torah and of the world. And I don't think the Kabbalists ever meant it that way. They were receivers. And Kabbalah is about receiving. It's a theology of religion, and there's a strong Christian Kabbalistic tradition, as well as Jewish. And when Kabbalah fell out of Judaism, the Christian Kabbalah thrived for many years in the 18th, 19th centuries. Modern philosophy was heavily influenced by Kabbalah, and modern psychology is heavily influenced by Kabbalah. And much of filmmaking and literature was influenced by Kabbalah. Shakespeare was a Kabbalist, and Locke was a Kabbalist. And I can go through lists and lists and of both scientists and writers and intellectuals of the 18th and 19th and into the 20th century. So it's a philosophy of religion that focuses on receiving. What do we receive? We receive four types of receiving. One is we receive the ability to be creation partners in ongoing creation with God. We receive the ability to be and feel holy. We receive holiness, and we'll learn in a few minutes what that means. We receive the ability to determine right and wrong, ethics, and to repent. And we receive the ability to discover, to receive revelation to the Kabbalists, to learn new things, to develop new wisdom and understanding, and develop new ideas. This is part of being a partner in creation. So those are the four themes of the most important work of Kabbalah from the 13th century, the Zohar. So this course is going to talk about the full cycle of Jewish rituals and customs, and disclose to you all, so you'll become Mekubalim, receivers in that sense of this hidden secret tradition, of the true essence of what Judaism was and could become. Again, most of the rituals of Judaism have Kabbalistic origin or have been adopted and reinterpreted by Kabbalists. What I'm going to do today is give you an orientation to the Kabbalistic idea of evil. What is evil and sin? And and put a new light on the Haggadah and the holiday of Pesach. Whole new approach to Pesach. And hopefully some of you will join the Farbrengen Kabbalistic Seder that my wife and I do every year. And you'll actually experience in what Kabbalah is in that Seder. But starting tonight, I hope as my objective is to give you enough information that you want to have that experience. You can experience it indirectly and start to apply what we're talking about tonight to Jewish prayer, which is very Kabbalistic, of course, and to Jewish rituals, from lighting the candles to saying Kiddush, to the bride circling the groom, to stepping on the glass, to waving of the lulav and etrog and how and why. So all of these rituals that rabbis typically make up meaning for have actual deep Kabbalistic significance to enhance and draw in God as something that we receive as opposed to something that's out there. So first concept of Kabbalah is that God is unknowable. The Zohar dwells on this extensively, that you can't know God. And that's based on Maimonides, an earlier philosophical tradition in Judaism, that God is unknowable. But what you can know is that God emanates. The only thing you can know about God is it cannot not emanate. It's always emanating creation into the world. And the flow of God into the world, called Shefa by Jewish renewal Kabbalists, Shefa comes from the verb hashva'ah, influence, or an abundant flow. So the hashva'ah or the Shefa is God's influence into the world and into us that enables us to be co-creators, to become holy, to feel God's presence. That's a flow in and of itself. Did everyone have a chance to download the handouts? So I'm going to pull those up on the screen now and do a share screen. There are two handouts that Jerry provided a link for. You may want to print those out so you can take notes on them and have them. One is what's called the Tree of Life. And the other is what I call figure 2, symbols, appellatives, aliases of Kabbalah. Because they're both very important. And I'll explain why as we go through this. So the first concept is unknowability. And the second is that God emanates into the world, and we can attach to that flow and experience God by what's called devakut, gluing to, attaching to the flow. And third, that creation isn't something that happened in 6 days, but it's ongoing, and we're partners in creation. And it's a mutuality of need between God, the flow into us, and the unknown source of God, called the infinite, the Ein Sof, and we, us, people, human beings, the Jews, and also other human beings, as co-creators, as receivers of and makers of holiness, of discoverers, and as people who balance ethics in the world. So I'm gonna pull this up, if I can share screen here, and tell me if you can see this. Can you see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Is it in color?
Yeah, and it's in color, nice colors.
Yeah, thank you. So those colors are all symbols of the different sfirot. The emanation of God into us is defined as 10 categories. 10 categories of, I see on the right side here, of revelation, ethics, holiness, and creation partnering. And that spells the Jewish dance Cher, C-H-E-R. That's a good way to remember the four categories. Creation, partnering on the bottom, holiness, ethics, and revelation. There are four levels that these more or less correspond to, as you see on the right, four worlds, so to speak. And there's three columns of these. The central column, it sort of harmonizes and balances this. And there's a left column and there's a right column. And there's a lot of dynamism of interaction, of flow in and out and back and forth, between them. And in that very first class in Kabbalah that Jerry mentioned, it was in the basement of a private school in Georgetown, and in the biology classroom. And there was this big chart of the DNA molecule. And as I was looking at this and looking at the DNA molecule, that made sense. It's one of the things that intrigued me, just discovering that connection. It's like a molecule. In fact, the nucleus of this is what's called Tiferet. Now, each of these 10 Sefirot, which could mean spheres in the Greek, or numbers in Hebrew, or tellings, or communication, some of Peresh root. Each of these has a cluster of meanings and a cluster of symbols. So we're going to talk about both. And the second handout we'll talk mostly about next week is the cluster of symbols. The center column, let's talk about that first. Starts at the top with the unknowable source. Well, you can't know, that's why it's black. It's no light, but out of that, it comes this flow of light. It's a common metaphor used by the Kabbalists: flow of water, flow of light, flow of electrons, forces, energies, however you want to see them, flow of angels, even as deliverers of these potencies, as they're called. They're also called flow of attributes, because these are like attributes of one God. But the center of this, with the name Yud Hey Vav Hey, God's names are associated with these different flows. Oh, there's one God, God has many names, and that's how the Kabbalists understand that. And Jewish prayer comes alive when you understand that Yud Hey Vav Hey, pronounced Adonai, Lord, is the nucleus, and is at the same time the aspect of God which is holy, the God of holiness. It really means balance, equilibrium, oneness, that capacity for coalescing and holding the world together, harmony, peace, or completeness. All of that cluster of meaning together is the nucleus, Tiferet. And what does it harmonize? It harmonizes the left and the right side. Below that is a sphera called the All, or Yesod. And Yesod is need fulfillment. We all have needs. It's the aspect of God that is the life force that gives us life. We thank for being alive. That we say when we say Modeh ani leparecha, I'm grateful to you when I get up in the morning. It's the first thing to say. And if you're a Kabbalist, you can try to feel the flow coming into your left leg, which is the flow into Hod, gratefulness, emotion, from the word Hoda'ah. But Yesod is righteousness. It's all of these flows coming through Yesod. And the bottom one in the center column, perhaps the most important, is us, our ability within us to feel God's presence, called the name of God, Shekhinah, God that we can experience, to feel the presence of. You see, Kabbalah is not Jewish mysticism. Great misunderstanding. It's a philosophy that enables Jewish mysticism. You see the difference? And Jewish meditation, if it's done correctly, Kabbalistic meditation, is one of feeling these flows coming in, of balance and harmony, of need fulfillment and healing, and of feeling the presence of God. Not necessarily in that order. Many people like to move up from the bottom. Others like to feel the flow coming down. But the shofar on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that's a tremendous Kabbalistic meditative opportunity to hear the sound and hear the flow. Shema, the word listen, it's what really means receive. When you receive the flow, you're receiving it through your ears, whether it's in song, in idea, or in music, or in the shofar. So what are these on the left and the right side? We covered the middle column, right? It's all perfectly clear, very simple. So number one is Keter, and then you have a dialectic here between wisdom, Chokhmah, and intelligence, Bina. Now, wisdom also is insight, imagination. There's a cluster of meanings around that. But Chokhmah is this vague concept described in the Zohar as a fast-flowing stream that flows through from nothingness, or from which is Keter, Ein Sof, from the nothingness, the source that we can't know. First thing we can know is wisdom that flows into a sea, called Bina, which is intelligence. So you have the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain. It's the parts of the body. But also the heart is code for Bina, and the mind for Chokhmah. So you have wisdom and you have understanding that interact with each other. They're two different things. Wisdom is some ability to see the whole picture of something, so to solve a problem, because you can understand all the dynamics of it. And intelligence and understanding is how to use it, how to build. Wisdom is the concept of the architecture of a new building you want to create, but how do you actually do it? That's the Bina aspect of it. Then you have a dualism here below that, a dialectic between kindness, compassion, altruism, our conscience. All that cluster meaning is loving kindness, chesed, also called gedula. It's to make things complicated. The Kabbalists have multiple core names of these. But that has as its counterpart, as its partner on this level, the concept of power, of strength, of governance. The word deen really means governance, energy, the power of coalescence, the power that God flows into the world that enables life to be created through the coalescence of matter, of organic matter. And out of life come animal life and evolution, leading to human beings, and human beings coalesce into tribes and families and nations for even more potent ability to create, to co-create. And that dynamic between chesed and gevura is deeply discussed in the Zohar and in Kabbalistic literature. it brings a whole different perspective to understanding the Torah itself. So then you have the nucleus, Tiferet, that balances this, keeps it in harmony. And we'll see why that's so important in a minute when we get to the concept of evil and sin. But below that, you have another dynamic dualism, and you guys can see this as I move the screen and you see my pointer. You have Netzach, meaning everlasting or enduring, and what's everlasting and enduring are our values and our principles, our ability to formulate ethics, to have a personal mission in life. All of that, those meanings are connected, and that's why we call it Netzach. But countering that is its partner, and these are almost always talked about together in the Zohar and in Kabbalistic writing, is what's called Hod, which literally means majesty, but has nothing to do with the meaning of this, of its ultimate meaning, which is motivating emotion. You have a mission, a purpose that you formulated, you have principles and values, but you need motivation in order to be a co-creator with God, in order to bring holiness into the world. In order to have ethics, you need principles and you need emotion to motivate you. That could be positive emotion, like gratitude, as I mentioned, that you can actually connect to and feel, and that's the essence of Hasidism, particularly Chabad Hasidism, is trying to live 24 hours a day or 12 hours a day, as long as you're awake, feeling in total gratitude for being alive and for everything that happens to you during the day. It's a whole way of life. But it can also have negative. You can have jealousy, can be a motivator, anger, frustration, impatience. And we're seeing that if you're following the Parshat of Shavua, last week, this week in the book of Bamidbar, you're seeing that dynamic take place with Yud He Vav He, Tiferet, the whole concept of balance, and with Moses, who is the Sphira of Netzach, and Aaron, who's the Sphira of Hod. So all the forefathers relate to these different Sphirot, as well as the names of God and the colors. Those are 3 of about 20 major categories of symbols. So Yesod we talked about, and Malchut we talked about. So they all flow into Yesod, and Yesod is also righteousness. That I should add to this version here. Righteousness is another name. Making things right is righteousness. And that's part of the mission of the Jewish people and of humankind, more generally, as partners in ongoing creation. So the Shekhinah is the receiver, is our ability to receive this. So when we say the Kiddush, we're actually Kabbalistically welcoming the Sabbath bride, which is code for the Shekhinah, which is Malchut, which is the ability to feel God's presence, to have an intercourse, a merger, a unification with the concept of unity itself, of oneness, of balance and harmony. Holiness and balance and harmony and oneness is all the same thing. That's the definition in Kabbalah of holiness, is establishing balance and harmony. And if we can establish by welcoming the bride in the Chadodi and in the Kabbalah Shabbat service and in the Kiddush on Shabbat, we become one and we make ourselves holy, and we create, as Abraham Joshua Heschel says, a palace of holiness in time. We make the Shabbat holy. And that's what lighting the candles is all about. Is we wave 3 times and cover our eyes rising up through these levels and drawing down the shefa, the flow, and at the same time creating this balance, this unity between our ability to receive and feel God and of the flow of holiness itself from the nucleus. So we become holy and we make Shabbat holy. And at Havdalah, at the end, we take the 3 candles, we put it into the wine, which is symbol of power, of Gevura, and we extinguish this additional soul that's been created, this neshama yitara, that's this additional soul that we have, that from Kabbalah Shabbat, from the beginning of Shabbat, from welcoming the bride, we maintained that as Kabbalists for 24, 25 hours, and now we're ready to enter the week anew. And that's what the theme of the prayer Lecha Dodi is, which we'll go over next week when we talk more in depth about Shabbat. So those are the 10 Sfirot and how they interrelate. So where's evil in all of this? How does this help us to deal with Hitler and Nazism and the Holocaust and Ukraine and Putin and what's happening today? Is there evil in the world? Certainly Jewish history is full of evil, including in our own kings, 1,000 years of kings, one worse than the next. So you can understand the legacy of where this came from, but you have wisdom and you have intelligence. But what if you have intelligence without any wisdom? And you know how to build gas chambers, and you know how to build missiles and thrust them without much precision into neighborhoods of Ukrainian cities and flatten those cities. And what's the wisdom in that? And what's the wisdom of attacking Ukraine in the first place? Anyone who's smart, as opposed to foolish, the opposite of wisdom, would know it's not going to take 3 days to conquer this. And 3 months later, it's a stalemate, and people are still suffering, tremendous suffering in the world. It's heart-wrenching. So there's some examples of the blocking of wisdom without having only intelligence. But if you also don't have any loving kindness and you have intelligence, you have no compassion, you can't feel another's pain. Well, that's when it's easy to lob missiles into cities or to create gas chambers or to just shoot people as a mass killer. And you have power to do that. You're given the AR-15 rifle, machine gun in the hands of someone who has no sense of compassion for anyone else, can just kill people and in fact gets joy out of it. So an aspect of the evil inclination of Hod. The same thing with principles on the right side. You can have, if you have no principles, that makes it easy to become a mass murderer, right? And finally, on the left side, if you have blind emotion without wisdom, without compassion, kindness, altruism, totally self-centered emotion, and without principles, then you have the worst kind of ruler, particularly if they have power in their hands, as president of the United States or as the dictator of Russia. It's very people who seem on the surface to be smart but really don't have wisdom, definitely powerful, but they have no regard for anyone but themselves. They're totally self-centered, they're Gevura driven, and someone who is motivated because they hate Jews or whoever they're persecuting. Then you have the potential for evil. potential to make gas chambers. So did God let the Holocaust happen? Well, Kabbalists say, well, you don't know God. God's unknowable. But there's an aspect of God that is in evil, this left-hand side. The left-hand side of understanding and intelligence, power and coalescence, emotions, and motivation more widely. And all of that has what's called the Yetzer Hara, an evil inclination. That's what Yom Kippur is all about, how we can identify by thinking through ourselves, our communities, our relationships. Where have I had a shortfall of the right side with regard to the left side? In my co-creation role, in my ethics, in my holiness, in my receiving and discovery, my revelation, same word in Hebrew, revelation and discovery. So why do we have a left side? And why is that part of God? Because we can't be co-creators if we don't have intelligence. We just have wisdom. We just have all the kindness and goodness in the world, and we just have principles. We know people like that. We know some of them are politicians. They're all right side, but they're not very smart, or they just don't have the know-how to be able to build that building or to be able to write that book. They don't have any power. They don't have any money to carry out these wonderful intentions, and they don't have the motivation to do it. We need that. No one's going to build a home, as it says in the Talmud, without the left side. This is long-term Jewish philosophy and Jewish tradition. This is not something invented by the Kabbalists. They built upon this. So this is the explanation of repentance and of evil. It gives us a framework, which we try to use in Farbrengen every year on Tashlich, is I ask people to think through their life in three categories over the past year. Where have they had a shortfall of Chokhmah versus Bina? Where has there been a shortfall of Chesed and Gevura? Where has there been a shortfall of Netzach and of Hod? And you'd be surprised, just going through that exercise, at all of the sins that you need to rebalance. Because teshuvah means, what? It means return to balance. Repenting, teshuvah, is a return to harmony, to holiness, to bring ourselves to holiness. And in the Ne'ilah service, that's Jewish form of rebirth of our soul, renewal of our soul, rebalancing of our soul, because we've come out with the shofar blasts and the recitations, Adonai Hu Elohim, 7 times for one of these lower sfirot. We've come out with a new soul, with a new start, a holy soul. Don't you feel that way on Yom Kippur? That's why. It's your Kabbalist. And you've experienced the day. And the day is so much more meaningful if you understand all of this. Now, other aspects of Judaism, everything to do with sevens, is these lower 7. You have wisdom and understanding at the top, and then out of understanding and intelligence is the sea and the 7 streams that come out of the 7 lower sfirot, representing Sunday through Shabbat. So Chokhmah, wisdom, is Sunday, Bina is Monday, Chesed is Tuesday. That becomes very important in understanding the counting of the Omer and the 7 days of each of the holidays of Pesach and particularly of Sukkot. 7 days of Sukkot, the day of Chokhmah, or the day of Abraham, is the first day. Second day is the day of Isaac, or the day of Chesed and Abraham, or the day of Gevura and Isaac, Tiferet or Joseph. And what are you doing? You're drawing in. When the lulav and the etrog, if you have never tried it, try it this year. Building your own sukkah, which is the symbol itself. It's a metaphor for being a co-creator with God, building this temporary sukkah. And inside your sukkah, you're waving in 6 directions to bring in drawing in 3 times the potencies of all of these into yourself and strengthening yourself as you meditate on creation, partnering, holiness, ethics, and discovery. What do I need to strengthen in my life? How do I strengthen? That's experiencing Kabbalah when you do that. And if we were all in person and it was Sukkot, I'd bring out my lulav and etrog, we'd all try it. And then you'd really get the sense of what I'm talking about here, feeling that flow. That's a form of Kabbalistic meditation. It goes back to biblical times. So next week we'll talk about that and what the lulav and the etrog really symbolizes and bringing them together. And it's beautiful. So that brings me to the holiday of Pesach, which I wanted to cover today. Why is this night different from all other nights, right? And why do we eat matzah? And no chametz? And why do we dip? And why do we dip twice? And why is everybody leaning to the left? Particularly as they drink the wine and they eat the ceremonial foods. And what does the maror and the charosis and the wine really symbolize? So Kabbalistically, this holiday really comes alive because it starts the day before or the evening before with searching for chametz and then burning the chametz and sending it back to God. Well, what is chametz? Well, according to the Talmud, chametz is the evil inclination. We've eliminated chametz from our diet, from our lives. We've sold it to non-Jews. We don't own any evil inclination. So what does that enable us to do? It enables us to read the Haggadah and celebrate the left side of the tree of life. This is called the tree of life, Eitz Chaim. And that means we can celebrate our intelligence, our power, our emotions, without worrying about sinning. That's why we lean to the left. That answers question number 1. Why is this night different? Because we can lean to the left. Because we can celebrate the left side. And how we can use these flows to free other people, to create a better world, to be true co-creators in whatever purpose we have in life, whether it's bringing up children or whether it's building and running a business, whether it's being involved in charity and giving. It's something to think about on this wonderful holiday of Pesach, the Kabbalists, as you lean to the left and you draw in the flow. 4 glasses of wine, 1 for each of these lower 4, creating the foundation. First glass of wine is opening the gates with Tiferet for the flow of bringing holiness in. The second glass is creating the foundation, creating life. At the end of the reading of the story, you created the foundation. You have the second glass of wine. At the end of the meal, you have the third glass of wine, of bringing emotion into your new mission. And at the end, at the Netzach, or the Nirtzach, at the conclusion, you have the fourth glass, where you really are now, just like on Yom Kippur and Ne'ilah, you can feel new motivation. So you have this strange story in the Haggadah that nobody understands about the rabbis of Bnei Brak talking all night long about the going out of Egypt until their disciples came and said, it's time for the reading of the Shema. What's that mean? Well, historically, those rabbis were rabbis involved in the Bnei Brak revolt in the 2nd century against Rome. Rome is considered the epitome of evil, and the evil inclination. Edom, it was what Rome was called from the Edomites, going back to Esau. There's this tradition of evil inclination in Judaism, and its thread is throughout Torah. And we're reading about that evil inclination now in the Zohar interpretation of Bamidbar. So you have the story of the four of the rabbis of Bnei Brak, who are actually talking that in code, which is what the Zohar is all about. It's written in code, and they're talking about really planning a revolt. And the disciples, the young students, say, okay, it's time to act. Stop planning. Let's go out and do it. Now, it was a dismal failure, that revolt, and created Hadrianic persecutions and scattered the Jews all over the world. But the message is that there's a time for us to be able to use the powers of the left side to make a better world. And that's the theme of the Haggadah. You really can't understand the Haggadah without understanding Kabbalah. So you see this interplay between the need for evil in the world that comes to bear on Pesach, on Passover. And all of the ceremonial acts of eating have to do with these sefirot. That's the symbolism of the Kabbalah. The Charosis is the perfect balance of wine and sugar and nuts and everything in Charosis. It's a perfect recipe. But the marur is hod, feeling the suffering, the ability to have feeling, to be motivated to carry something out. And we make a sandwich of matzah, which is the bread of the oni, of the impoverished bread. It's in the beginning of the Haggadah. Instead of chametz, it's incomplete. Incomplete intelligence is without wisdom. But you add that in a sandwich, the Hillel sandwich, with maror, matzah and maror together, and you close your eyes, and at the Kabbalistic Seder, we have everybody just concentrate, meditate on that taste and that receiving of those two forces together. And with each glass of wine, as we lean to the left, wine is gevura. And you can feel the strength coming in, feel the flow, and feel the power coming into us. The story itself is about God's strong arm in freeing his people, and the coalescence of this disorganized rabble into a people, leading right up in Exodus to the giving of the Ten Commandments, to cement that people in the building of a mishkan, of a tabernacle of holiness, all left-sided, the whole story. So that's an overview of this symbolism system and how it applies to just one holiday, to Pesach. And it provides at the same time an understanding of how we can deal with evil as it impacts our lives. That God didn't cause the Holocaust. God gave us the powers to be able to conquer it and survive it. That everyone has that evil inclination. It's part of being human. And we've got to continuously rebalance the world in order to address that. So let me end the share so I can see everybody again. You're all still here? Pretty much. So I want to read a little bit of Zohar to you. That's in this parsha from last week. In the Zohar is what I call surreptitiously subversive. In a hidden way, it is subversive to the Midrash tradition and traditional interpretation of the surface of Torah. And so it reads, Rab Shimon said, "Woe to the person who says that Torah is intended to present a mere story and ordinary words. This story of Torah is a garment of Torah. Whoever thinks that the garment is the essence of Torah will have no future." King David said in Psalm 119, "Uncover my eyes so I can see wonders out of your Torah. Uncover my eyes so I can see the wonders, the hidden revelation in Torah." Well, what is beneath the garment of Torah? That's what's beneath the garment of Torah. These revelations. Fools, those who lack wisdom, just bina, just intelligence. Fools look only at the garment, at the story. The wise look only at the soul of the Torah. The root, the real Torah, the root of all. And all is the other name for Yesod, of life itself, the flow of life itself. So I want to have some time for questions. So let me turn this over to questions now. I'm sure everything was perfectly clear. But the one point I want to end with is, okay, why was this lost? This was 400 years of the core of understanding Judaism. Where was it lost? Well, what happened is in the 1720s, the scholars believe that the rabbis of Poland, who were the chief rabbis of all of Eastern Europe, were worried intensely about the Shabbat and Holiday false messiah movement and the vestiges of that among young people in particular. And it became associated, those meetings, with Kabbalistic practices and Kabbalistic understanding, and plus the fact that the Zohar is surreptitiously subversive to students of Midrash. So they didn't forbid Kabbalah. They were all Kabbalists themselves. That was core to their understanding, but they said no one's allowed to teach or to study Kabbalah until they're 40, and they've already mastered the Midrash. Before you can try to interpret the Zohar in its surreptitious approach to the stories of the Bible, and its approach to dealing with the genocide that's coming up in a few weeks in Bamidbar. How do you deal with that? Well, it's dealt with surreptitiously, but very, very wisely. And that is the soul of Torah and the soul of the Zohar. Both are equally holy for hundreds of years. The Zohar and the Talmud itself, for sure. Maybe the Torah is a different category because that's the transmitter of revelation. And that's what the Zohar is about. It's not on Kabbalah. It is doing Kabbalah. As these rabbis talk to each other in this code language of symbols that I gave you all the key to, that you have here. Okay. Any questions, discussions, complaints?
There's more stuff in the chat, Jay. You might want to look at.
Okay. So, like the universe emerging from a black hole. Exactly. This is so congruent with and complementary to modern physics, the creation of the universe. This whole idea of coming out of nothingness, the great explosion that created matter and the coalescence of matter. So the duality of good and bad consistently on the left and the right of the chart, with the left being proclivity and the ability to be evil, inclination, while the right is constraint. Well, that's a great way to look at it. That's very well put. Do you have a Kabbalistic Haggadah that you recommend? No, I should write such a Haggadah. But I wrote a chapter in my book, which I welcome everybody to buy on Amazon.
Which book, Jay?
On connecting to Judaism. And what we've been talking about is the focus of the first book, Understanding Evil. It's just elaborating on this, and it's a midrash on Genesis, the book of Genesis, and the ongoing creation of the world, which is the Kabbalistic theme of Genesis, as the Greek name Genesis implies. Yeah, there's a long chapter. I think the longest chapter in this is about this. And then you don't need a Kabbalistic Haggadah. The Haggadah is Kabbalistic once you understand the symbolism. And the fun of doing a Kabbalistic Seder is not to have it all out written for you, but to take the traditional Seder and discover, oh, well, that's what the story of the rabbis of Bnei Brak is about, and the four sons. And now the four questions. Why do we lean to they all make sense. Much of the Haggadah was written by a Kabbalist. You can tell, even though the core of the Haggadah is in the Mishnah, but the interpretation and the added rituals are all Kabbalistic. So you see what the effect was on the spirituality of Judaism when this was lost in 1720s, because within a generation, with not even rabbis being taught until the late 20th century, there weren't even courses in rabbinic schools in the United States. In Hebrew Union College, where I went, or the Jewish Theological Seminary, there weren't professors of Kabbalah. So until at least the 70s or 80s or even the 90s, and still isn't taught in Orthodox seminaries. So it was lost, all of the meaning of what we do, of why the bride circles the groom or the couple circles each other, why we step on the glass which is shattering of the vessels and the delivery of the sfirot, being a reminder of not the destruction of the temple, but of the destruction of the flow into us. And that this new soul, this new couple being united, is restoring the flow of the Shefa into the world, into themselves. It's just a beautiful custom there. So do I have a Kabbalistic Haggadah? No, this is Kabbalistic. So what is the bad part of Berg's, the Kabbalah Center approach? I read all the books and I'm not sure I understood. You've made it much more understandable. Is the issue with Berg that it's so inscrutable, or is there a bad place that they go, that goes to? And it's a lot of that. That's a lecture in and of itself. And in fact, that's a dissertation. And I wrote that dissertation on Bergism, or the Kabbalah Center, in contrast to Jewish renewal. And there's a lot of positive that comes out of the Kabbalah Center that I really laud. And my own sense of this whole approach that I've described tonight of receiving is very much Ashlagian, which is the same foundation as the Kabbalah Center comes out of. The Kabbalah Center under Rav Berg became accused of cultism, which didn't help its reputation. And they tried to move away from that cultish aspect of it. And that's sort of a shadow side of that. Much of it, in my opinion, unfair. But it also diverted and started the term Kabbalah into a sort of a modern sort of well, just what's the word I'm thinking of? Well, it became a contemporary cult-like phenomenon that goes far beyond the Kabbalah authentically, which is what you're learning tonight. This is the Zohar, and 16th century, how the Isaac Luria group built upon that. They include a lot of things like red string and scanning of the Torah that are their own customs and rituals. The red string should actually be the Patil Techelet, the blue string that's on the tzitzi that we read about this past week in the Torah portion. That should be a reminder of the Shekhinah. That's what the Zohar defines it as, the blue string. And we read that in the advanced Monday night Kabbalah class that I conduct. And incidentally, it's an objective, besides stimulating everybody to be interested in Kabbalah in their own lives, that we'd love to have more recruits from this class into the advanced class, and you'll all be qualified to join that class after one session. It's on Mondays at 6 to 7:15, also on Zoom. So Bergism is very complicated. I can go into that a little bit more next week, but it has its positives. And when I interviewed Reb Zalman, which is the other side of the coin, he's the spiritual leader of Jewish Renewal Movement, Zalman Schachter Shalomi, and I asked him questions about Bergism, and he said, I went there once, and I was really impressed. He said, they really have something. And I said, well, Reb Zalman, why don't do you ever teach about receiving? Or because your approach is all rising up higher and higher through these worlds, and which is incidentally difficult. That's what's complex and hard to get. And Berg made things a lot easier to understand and created a strong following. And Reb Zalman could never really, people couldn't connect to it. It was too abstract. And he said, yeah, I would teach the Yuridat HaShefa, as he called it, the drawing down of this. I've mentioned that a few times, but it wasn't not the focus for me. It's because I come from the Hasidic strain of Kabbalah, which is rising up higher and higher to higher levels towards Chokhmah and towards Bina. and that way you reach oneness. So much of what I teach as Kabbalah comes out of Ashalagian, the same source as the Kabbalah Center. So I hope that answers the question there on the Kabbalah Center. This was very interesting. Thanks for making this clearer. You're welcome. Great. Compare the Jewish and Catholic Kabbalism. I never knew there was a Catholic approach to it. That's historically fascinating. It is fascinating, and it was a major strain, a major in intellectual Catholicism and Christianity generally. And the Tree of Life still pertains, but here's the chart again, where you have, but according to different writers, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost are Chokhmah, Bina, and Tiferet, but also the Father could be the unknown source, Keter, the Son, Jesus is Tiferet, and the Holy Ghost, well, that's synonymous with the Shekhinah. So there's a lot of universalism in this, which is really beautiful. So sometime I'm going to write a version with a Catholic scholar on interpreting the traditions of Christianity to Kabbalistically. Any other questions that I didn't get to?
Yeah, Jay?
Yes.
Can you hear me? This is fascinating, Jay.
Hi.
I'm going to ask you a question that would take hours to answer. And of course, many different spiritual traditions have some concepts in common. And in terms of the world of Eastern spiritual traditions, and of course there are many and they go off in different ways, but I wonder if any of the teachers of those traditions have looked at the Kabbalah, certainly the idea of emanations and growing more deeply in wisdom at various stages resonate with certain teachings. And I wonder if there's been any systematic thinking across these different voices and different traditions.
Well, there's been a lot of Christian writing on Kabbalah, and I'm not really an expert in all of the more contemporary writing, but the Christian Kabbalah spread into Judaism largely by converts that taught it to the priests in the 14th and 15th centuries in particular, and it really became central to Enlightenment thinking in the next several centuries.
What about the Eastern world? I mean, you've tried to distinguish between the essence of Kabbalah itself opening doors to deepen spiritual practices and the term mysticism. But some of the Eastern religious teachings, have there been comparative approaches or comments?
In the Middle East, Zoroastrianism, for instance, is considered an influence on Kabbalah in different respects. And the earlier philosophical traditions, such as Neoplatonism, were a deep influence on the Kabbalists of the 12th and 13th centuries. The whole concept of emanation, in fact, they call them spheres or sphirot, is influence on Neoplatonism, which is a philosophical movement, not a religious group. But there's a lot of cross-fertilization. But I think from the East, and from the Middle East in particular, the influence was into Judaism, into the Kabbalists, but and vice versa. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else have questions? Just
There are more questions in the chat. Number of questions in the chat.
thoughts on Kabbalah and the Enlightenment. I can see they historically sequential. Though Zohar claims to be much earlier. How does the Kabbalah become Locke? Yeah, that's a great question. That's a whole lecture in and of itself. But and a strong influence were the converts into Christianity, but and the flow didn't really come the other way, because at the same time it was being lost. It was forbidden to study Kabbalah, and the more that Christians studied Kabbalah, even the more anxious the rabbis were. And I mean that the loss of Kabbalah in Judaism lasted until the late 19th, 20th century. I mean, it was till recent times. We're only now still discovering what everything means. I
mean more real.
Newton was one who he wrote. Do you know that Sir Isaac Newton wrote more treatises on Kabbalah than he did on science? Is that into Kabbalah, and the true author of the Shakespearean writing was a Jewish mistress of the major donor and sponsor of the theater, as opposed to the historical Shakespeare, who was just a fairly ignorant actor, who happened, and she happened to come from Florence, Italy, and that background that you have to have in order to be able to have written those plays. So it just makes all the sense. So.
Jay, I'm trying to actually ask that question from a different, from a philosophical perspective. I understand, or at least a long time ago, studied Locke, and I'm trying to understand what you're teaching now. I don't get where that tree of life becomes the political Locke or the sovereign. I'm not quite getting where that is. Is it just the intellectual power of Kabbalah, or is there a more direct philosophical connection?
Yeah, and I can't answer that question because I'm not an expert in Locke, but we know that he studied Kabbalah. How this became an influence in their philosophy of Newton and Locke and others is another question. But they all talked about it. Spinoza was definitely influenced by Kabbalah. He wrote that the teacher who most influenced him was a middle-aged Kabbalist. So there's that direct connection into Spinoza, and it influenced Kant and Schopenhauer, a number of Kabbalists, of philosophers from in the Enlightenment period, but those are all dissertations waiting to be done to actually trace those influences in the works themselves in their writing. And the last thing that most of them would do would be to attribute anything to anyone else. That was their original ideas.
Jay, there's a couple of questions about perhaps joining your class. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to put your email contact in here. And I also put it into the email that I send out later when the recording is ready. Is that all right with you?
Great. And if you want, I can give you the link. I'm going to put the link in the chat to the class on Monday. But it's best to send me an email and tell me you're interested, and then I'll resend the link and a summary of what we're going to talk about, which I do with everybody who's on the mailing list for the class. So you're all welcome to come to the class on Monday. As I mentioned, it's an advanced Zohar class, but we'll try to explain what we're doing and how the symbolism works. And we have a lot of fun. So let me see, where's the chat? Here again, I'll try to find it. It's covered up with this. Here. Whoops, chat. There it is. So I'm going to send to everyone the secret link. It didn't come out somehow.
I don't see anything.
No. Join.
For some reason, I'm not able to cut and paste your email either, so I'm trying to retype it without making a typo.
Well, I think what I'm going to have to do is to put my email address in the chat then.
Yeah, I put that in the chat already.
Okay.
And
So
I will also include it in the email that I send out.
Yeah.
So when the recording is ready.
just indicate in the title of the email that you'd like an invitation to come to the class. I'll put you on the list. Okay. So, yeah, thank you for all coming. And my 2 books are available on Amazon, as I mentioned. And I hope I've succeeded in stimulating an interest in this, to me, a wonderful theology and a foundation for what I'm seeking, which is greater spirituality.
It does look like the chat can't be saved. I'll have to try to see what the settings are, so next time we could save the chat. I will also put the chat.
Yeah.
I'll make the chat available to people, and it'll be in the same place where the 2 documents are.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think I saved the chat.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can just go to the 3 buttons on the right at the bottom of the chat, and it says save on the top of that menu. Okay. Anyone have anything else they want to talk about with regard to Kabbalah, since people are hanging around?
Oh, I see. I see you, everybody, right?
I'd like to follow up on this is Vivian Clare. I'd like to follow up on one of Mindy's questions. Has any scholar compared and contrasted versions of Buddhism and Jewish Kabbalah thinking? I know a lot of Jews seem to be, particularly in California, seem to be very interested in Buddhism.
Yeah, well, Reb Zalman did a lot of work on, but nothing that he published. But the book, The Jew and the Lotus, and it's about Buddhism, connections to Buddhism. And it's a wonderful book. And this is an author that followed Reb Zalman around and wrote about his adventures in Hinduism and in Buddhism. And a lot of Jew-Boos, as they're called, Jewish Buddhists from the 60s, brought back a lot of concepts the other direction into Jewish renewal. But I don't know of any other works about influences in Buddhism. But definitely in Christianity. Okay, well, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I thank you, Jay, as well as the people who are participating over here. Again, I'll send the email out. If you want some particular information, email to Jay or email to me at Jewish Studies Center at gmail.com, and we'll try to accommodate. And otherwise, we'll see everybody at the same time next week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
And we'll close down now.